Hey, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. Subscribing really helps my channel. For all of our fancy knives we have in our pocket or in our everyday carry, most of the time we use them to open packages, tear down boxes for recycling, and cut string or tape. And to be honest, for that last job, for string or tape, scissors are probably better. I'm going to have a look at some of the available options for opening packages and cutting cardboard. Here are just some. I'll go through some other ones as well, and we can look at some of the pros and cons of using each one. I've started with tools that I already had. And in fact, a couple of these I've borrowed from my son. So for example, here we have the traditional utility knife. In this case, it's a Stanley, a pretty ancient one that I have. I also have a pocket version, the outdoor edge. So I think this is well worth looking at. We have the safety cutter, the slice, we have a small screwdriver, a pen, a lot of people use that, and then we have two of our traditional pocket knives, one being quite large, one being smaller, and maybe thinking about, rather than gumming up the main blade on tape, it might be better to use one of the tools for that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go through each of the options. We'll have a look at some of them in work and see what you think. For the purposes of this demonstration, I've got an old Amazon box. I picked a small one just because it's easier to fit into frame. And to keep it consistent, instead of using the Amazon reinforced tape, I'm just using sellotape. This means I can retape it in between each go, and so it's going to be comparable between all of them. So let's start first of all with one that I didn't mention in the intro. So scissors. This is something we all have to hand. Scissors have a nice sharp edge normally. The only problem is that to get a good grip on scissors, typically you're having to hold the blade, so it's not quite as safe. When you run it through, it cuts easily enough because of the sharp blade on the scissors, so I don't think there's too much of a problem there. My main concern with this is in damaging anything inside the box. And it's not as easy to get a clear cut. There's also a risk of cutting your fingers. So I wouldn't say that I would recommend scissors. I know we've all done it. I think there's a risk of either hurting ourselves or what's in the box. Let's have a look at another alternative. So I've retaped the box. You can see it's fairly firm. So here's another implement that we often use, the ballpoint pen. Let's see how well this works. If you push it in, I think you get quite a good cut. It relies on piercing the tape. It's not always easy when it's slippery. There's always a risk of you puncturing whatever's inside and of course writing on it. So whilst I think it's a safer option than the scissors, it's not really ideal, is it? This time, let's use another one of those implements that we have around. So this is one of my house keys. It's not that good at getting through the sellotape. It takes a bit to get through it. It doesn't cope well with it being slippery. The other thing I'd be concerned about is maybe the gum from the sellotape getting onto the key and getting into the lock, making it harder to get into your house. So I think the key is an alternative. It's not really a good. On my keyring, I also have the Gerber shard. Now this has a couple of sharp edges on it that you can use, either the Phillips head or the part of the pry bar, and particularly the small crosshead. Let's try that. So it's not too bad at pushing through. It's not so good when it comes to cutting through the sellotape, as it's not especially sharp, so it does take quite a lot of force to get through. Anyway, that was the Gerber shard. Next option is a screwdriver. In this case, it's a Stanley 4-in-1 screwdriver. I'll be showing this at a later date, but I just wanted to say it could be any small flat blade. It works better with a flat blade than actually with a Phillips one, as you might expect. So this is a little bit sharper, certainly sharper than the Gerber shard. It gets through the sellotape better, but not that great. I think in all of these options we're missing a decent cutting blade. So let's take a look at the Victorinox Trailmaster. So this has a significant blade. In this case it's serrated. It makes very easy work of the sellotape. In fact, it's really good at cutting up cardboard in general. So I think there's no problem with it actually working, but if you can see on the blade here, it's a really great way to get a decent knife just completely gummed up with sellotape, and it's a real pain to have to keep cleaning that off. So I think this works really well. Would I want to use it? Maybe there's a better choice. That's the Trailmaster. Next, let's have a look at my Pioneer X A-locks. So what I really like about this is the awl. You may have seen this on the video that I did on the A-locks, or on the one that I've done on the Trailmaster where I compare the awls. This is particularly good at cutting through sellotape. What I like about it as well is that I'm not so precious about the awl, whereas with the main blade I might use that to cut up fruit. For some reason it doesn't seem to get as gummed up as the blade, and as I mainly just use it for making holes in things, I'm not so bothered if there's still a bit of residue on it. So that's the awl for the Pioneer X. Again, with both knives, I think you've got to be very careful that you don't go too deep. One strategy might be to hold it very near the end of there, which you can do fairly easily without cutting your thumb. On this back edge, it's not too sharp at all. So as you pull it through, you can do it without too much problem. My test box is getting a bit battered now. I don't think that's going to matter too much because these are all blades and they should get through it fairly easily. This is my fairly old Stanley knife. It's the 199E. It's a fairly solid knife, made in the USA. It has a retractable blade, and of course with all utility knife blades they cut really well. The good thing is you don't need to worry about gumming them up because they're really cheap to replace. So you can really mistreat the blades, blunten them, gum them up. They stay sharp because of the very narrow knife profile, so they cut for a long time even after they're blunt, certainly for this sort of boxes. So I think this is a great option. Again, I'd want to be a little bit careful about pushing it too far through the box. There's a risk of damaging something underneath. It's a bit big to carry about with you, certainly this one. Here we have a different utility knife. It's from Outdoor Edge, called the Sidewinder. I will do another video on this because I think it's worth a video in itself, but I just wanted to show you this also has a retractable blade. In this case, small blade. It has some tools as well, but I'll show you those later. But again, this, as with any blade, it cuts through really easily to open your box. You can also, with these sorts of blades, you can use them to cut down and to tear down the box if you really want to. They just go through it really easily. Of course, with all of these utility blades, you've got to be careful how you use them. It's very easy if you've got your hands in the way to end up cutting fingers, and they cut deep very quickly. So just to be really careful when you're using these. There is an option you can hold it part way, but this one it retracts automatically, so there's less chance of it being a problem if it's in your pocket. Compared to the Stanley knife as well, it's much smaller. If you can see this, even with the blades out, pairing the two together, it's about half the length of the traditional Stanley knife. So this is the last test. The box is well and truly battered now, so I might need to turn it over. Let's see how it goes. So here we have the slice, and this is a great safety cutter. It has a tiny chip, a tiny ceramic chip, but it's very good. It's not too sharp as long as you don't dig it in or pull it across, but it should cut through. It cuts through the sellotape pretty well. Let's just try it on here, and again on the end. It doesn't take too much as long as you can get through the sellotape, and it's done. Let's just turn it over as this is the last test. Let's see how it copes with the Amazon. I don't know if you can see this. I've had this for a long time, so it might be getting a little bit blunt now, but it works really well. So if you want a safety cutter, this is a great option. One of the benefits of this as well is that it's actually magnetic, so you can leave it stuck to where you need it and then just take it down when you want to use it. Now, I'm not sponsored by any of these knives I've shown. They're just ones that I happen to have around the house. I wanted to look at some different options for opening boxes. I'll talk a bit more about these afterwards, and I'd like to come back to this, maybe find some other utility blades to try out, particularly pocket ones. I think they're a great alternative to carrying a knife. If they've got removable blades, they then become flight friendly because you can always buy blades where you're going. Let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.